our guilty pleasure. Today, British confectionery is a £6 billion industry. But where did it all begin? We've asked 4 modern confectioners to go back in time, to work their way through 3 eras that revolutionised their trade. From the birth of their profession 4 centuries ago, where they'll craft luxuries for Tudor aristocrats.
Oh, it's cracking soon. It's getting worse.
To Georgian entrepreneurs storming the high street and tempting the fashionable middle classes.
Mould. Chocolate.
Jelly.
Both.
And finally, they'll work on the production line of the 20th century factory, making affordable goodies for the masses.
You're cog in a wheel. I'm a chocolate dipper.
Our 21st century confectioners will be learning to make the sweet treats of the past. They'll be using the ingredients, recipes and equipment of the time.
It looks like a tapeworm. This is bum clenching stuff.
They'll experience firsthand the triumphs and the trials of their profession.
Hot, hot, hot!
And they'll be creating sugary masterpieces which haven't been tasted for hundreds of years.
Oh my god, that is amazing.
But as well as making the treats of the past, our confectioners will be exploring the bittersweet story of sugar, an ingredient that transformed Britain, shaping our empire, bankrolling our cities, igniting our slave trade.
The cruelty is just terrible.
And changing the way we eat forever.
Andy Baxendale, Diana Short, Paul A. Young and Cynthia Stroud all work with sugar on a daily basis. But they are about to experience life as confectioners from 400 years ago, when sugar was a rare and precious commodity in England.
We owe a huge debt of gratitude to everybody who went before and discovered the methods and discovered the ways of doing things. And so much we do in modern confectionery we take for granted.
They'll be working as servants at Haddon Hall in Derbyshire, recreating original recipes from the 1580s, as printed English cookbooks began to mention sugar, through to the 1660s, when growing trade links were transforming the confectioner's world.
I don't know anything, but I'm really excited about to find out what we're going to get stuck with, if you like. Get stuck in and get dirty.
Sugar was an expensive luxury in this period, reserved for the upper classes. Over the next 4 days, our confectioners will be creating exquisite dishes to be served at an intimate aristocratic sugar banquet.
Oh my goodness.
You feel properly like you're back in Tudor times. I can hear the loops already.
Shall we go to the kitchen?
Come on,
let's go for it.
Our confectioners are entering a remarkable portal to the past, a kitchen which has some of the oldest working ovens and equipment in the country.
Wow.
Goodness.
This is what I like. Worn away by time. All the effort that's gone into chopping or...
Is that wood?
What does that do? It looks a bit disturbing.
That's our stove.
For heat on, to let the air in, so we get it going.
Alright.
Stuff on the other end, it balances. But
Where do you think the oven is then?
Oh yeah.
See the flue?
But there's nowhere to go.
This kitchen has none of the modern gadgets they rely on, and so will require all of their skills and intuition as confectioners.
There's the oven. Looks like my pizza oven. So much of it just looks so strange and counterintuitive. Nothing looks like what it's supposed to be.
Only the upper echelons of society could afford to employ their own confectioners. As artisans working with such a precious commodity, they were highly valued. Royal confectioners had their own department and were paid around £20 a year, triple the wages of an urban labourer. Welcome to Haddon Hall,
Hello.
and welcome to your kitchen.
Thank you.
I'm Dr. Annie Gray, a food historian, and I'll be guiding the confectioners, together with social historian Emma Dabbery. Well, this is your home for the next 4 days.
Wow.
It's a bit different to the kitchens you'll be used to. One of the primary things you'll notice is the lack of heating.
Yes.
Which is clearly going to be a slight issue, given that sugar work normally requires things like, heat and a dry atmosphere. But we can overcome everything.
The kitchen's not the only thing that's unfamiliar. The hard cones of Tudor sugar are nothing like what they're used to working with. So guys, this is the beating heart of the confectioner's world. This is sugar.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
How does it smell? Fantastic. It smells like actual sugar that you're used to, but
It's really fruity.
That's
It's
where
like
it stops.
Treacly, Christmas
yeah,
pudding-y.
Christmas pudding.
The earliest records of sugar in England are from the 12th century, when it was used sparingly as a condiment. As the trade routes of English merchants expanded across Europe and Africa, more sugar began to be imported from the cane fields of Morocco, Madeira, Spain, and Sicily. By the 16th century, 400 years later, confectionery had become a regular feature on the tables of the English elite.
So I don't know how much you guys know about sugar cane, but as soon as it's cut, it's very quickly squashed and then pressed. And the juice that comes out is boiled and then crystallized. But unlike modern sugar, which is made under quite strict hygienic conditions, thankfully, this is quite a different prospect. This crude sugar was often very dirty, and you might have been treated to such delights as bacteria, lice, soil, or even hair.
The English lust for sugar launched a new type of business. As early as 1544, London boasted 2 sugar refineries processing barrels of cane juice into sugar cones to be sold to the wealthy.
So up until the 19th century, there were tons of different grades of sugar, and that's because sugar is so incredibly expensive to refine. So the darker it is, the kind of lower quality it is. The whiter it gets, the higher grade of sugar it is. So the first thing you're going to have to do as professional confectioners is to clarify your sugar, to get rid of all of the impurities. And it's a task that would have been carried out on an almost daily basis in some cases, because you can't work with this. Now, we do know that at Haddon, better grades of sugar were brought in from time to time, but we're now in the late Tudor period. It's still hard to buy in those sugars, so let's start with the basics. You do have a recipe.
How amazing are those?
Taken from the original books.
So the first job is to decipher what they're actually saying.
One of the key points about sugar is that not only is it very, very expensive as a raw material, but it's incredibly labour intensive. So if you are able to display sugar, then you are showing that you can afford to buy it, afford to have the staff to process it, the time to process it. Our confectioners are following rare original recipes.
Shall I start chopping?
Yep.
Early printed cookbooks were invariably written by men, as less than 10% of women were literate at this time.
The manner to clarify sugar and honey. Good sugar, which is white and clear. That's not easy. You would get blisters. Found a technique. It's like chopping wood.
Yeah.
Cuts off.
It's so labour intensive just getting the sugar.
Chocolatier Paul has turned his childhood passion for all things sweet into a career. He now runs 3 boutique chocolate shops in London.
I love working with chocolate because it really fulfills every aspect of being a creative person. I think anyone who's given a cookbook that is from their parents or grandparents or great-grandparents, you have to value them a lot. It's all my mum's recipes, they're all handwritten, and the predominant recipes are sweet, like every page. It's messy as well.
It is, yeah.
This is precious.
Just as confectioners did more than 400 years ago, our team are using only the most primitive heat sources, charcoal-fueled chafing stoves. But first, they have to get them lit.
I nearly set myself on fire. Working with all of this around you, it's just not what we're used to. We're used to having close-fitting, garments which don't get in the way, which don't float around. And you forget they're there, and then you turn and that's it, and suddenly you're caught.
Wow. There's our stove, look.
They did not need to go to the gym back then. It's so physical.
That's it. I mean, we think we work hard now, don't we?
No.
But we don't have a clue, really.
Without the clocks, scales and measuring jugs of their 21st century kitchens, the confectioners are having to improvise.
That looks about the size of a pint glass.
How are we doing?
We're good.
One of the things you've clearly had to get to grips with is the lack of measurement, and you find various ways of measuring things, both time and weights, that you find in books like this. Say, for example, you may well find a recipe that calls for a walnut-sized piece of butter, knowing that everybody knows what a walnut looks like, or something where you're stirring something for the time it takes to say an Ave Maria, knowing that everybody knows how long it takes to say an Ave Maria.
Whew. It tastes lovely in the air.
To clean the pulverised sugar, it must be boiled up in water and then beaten together with egg whites.
Keep beating, little Rod.
My little rod is working very hard.
Paul is using a primitive Tudor whisk, basically a bundle of sticks.
That's good, isn't it? That works. My little rod works.
There's a lot of froth on the top.
When the egg white sets, that will be the thing that we'll be able to take off.
This is a familiar technique to trained chef and chocolatier Diana. Her grandfather was a chef at the Hyde Park Hotel in London in the 1940s, and the desire for culinary perfection is in the blood.
I suppose I'm anxious about not being able to achieve what I would like to achieve in any given situation. I don't like things to go wrong, and I get really antsy when things don't turn out right, and I'm kind of like, that's not good enough, I want to do it again. I like to eat nice things, so I like to make nice things. I think we will have to pop it back on, bring it back up to boil again, and then...
Quite a lot, isn't it, coming up?
Yeah.
As a desirable commodity, sugar even influenced the early days of England's foreign policy. In the 1580s, Queen Elizabeth I forged a controversial alliance with Muslim leaders in defiance of the Pope and traded arms and cloth for sugar.
You can see that beautiful clear liquid underneath.
Doesn't look that much lighter, but there is a lot of scum.
The English word for sugar even comes from the Arabic zucca, and in 1588 more than 450 tons of Moroccan sugar arrived in London. And the Queen and her loyal subjects weren't beyond stealing extra supplies. Port records from the end of the 1580s show that more than 500 tons of sugar a year were being brought back as booty from raids on enemy ships.
Oh, it's
Still really dark.
It's really, really dark.
That is delicious, though.
It's interesting that that's taken half a day just to make this much sugar that you can use, because what it was before wasn't actually, it wasn't stuff you could use.
No, time is money.
Absolutely.
It's never just the cost of the ingredients.
Yeah.
It's your salaries, it's your time.
Yeah.
That is what goes to make this the crucial ingredient.
Wow.
Sugar today is cheap and readily available. The average person in the UK eats the equivalent of 34 bags of sugar a year. In the late 16th century, average consumption was far lower, half a bag per year, but how much you got very much depended on your class. The less privileged members of society would have tasted sugar, but they would not have had regular access to it. It was just too expensive. It was usually kept rather ostentatiously in locked caddies and transported surrounded by padlocks so that thieving varmints couldn't get their hands on it. We know from their receipt the Manners family who owned this house spent as much on a loaf of Madeira sugar as they would have paid a carpenter to construct an entire bridge. After half a day, the sugar is finely clarified, and the confectioners can now start work on the dishes for their banquet.
Melt your sugar in this manner.
The first recipe is for comfits.
Half a pound of anise seeds for 2 pounds of sugar will make fine, small comfits.
Seeds such as aniseed, fennel or coriander, painstakingly covered with layer upon layer of sugar. We still eat licorice comfits today.
For a recipe this size, this must have been such an important part of the sweet table.
Absolutely. And when you think about it, if sugar's so expensive, to coat it, 8 to 10 times at a time, building up, this is the sign of look how wealthy I am.
Today, excessive sugar is known to be unhealthy, but Tudor confectioners believed it had healing properties. Coriander comfits were served at the banqueting table to aid digestion, in the belief that they closed up the stomach and prevented vomiting after a massive feast.
Should we check the syrup? Lift a little bit out.
No, it's still dropping.
Yeah,
No.
still
It's got to be
watering.
a
A lot more cooking, isn't it? Isn't it hard not having a sugar thermometer?
It is so hard. I mean,
to know, because you would just
everything's
look
so-
at it.
Everything's so physical here. You know, you're judging things by eye. It's all your five senses judged by
Yes.
eye, sticking your finger in and stuff.
Wealthy families could also buy in comfits from fairs and from traders in the big cities. One of the earliest of London's confectioners was a Spanish comfit maker called Balthazar Sanchez. Sanchez fled to Protestant England for religious reasons. Once here, he began to work for Queen Elizabeth I, an arch-rival of the Catholic Spanish. We can see the success of Sanchez's confectionery from this copy of his will. By the time of his death in 1602, he'd amassed a large enough fortune to be able to leave hundreds of pounds to feed London's poor and to build almshouses for them. This suggests his business was so successful that he had entered into the hallowed ranks of the gentry.
In the early days of the trade, very few confectioners enjoyed the wealth that Sanchez achieved. They might be highly valued craftsmen, but they were still dependent on their aristocratic masters, and they couldn't afford to make mistakes with the most expensive ingredient in the kitchen.
There we go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jane. Are you ready?
Paul and Cynthia are wrangling a balancing pan as they attempt to get just the right amount of sugar syrup on their coriander seeds.
Yeah, move that really quick or it will start to crystallise just in one block. It's not as easy as it looks, they're all clumping, aren't they? Well, I'm sure as it crystallises it should separate, shouldn't it? That looks so much better.
It does.
I had a little panic. Imagine how many hours, 3 hours just.
Yeah, I think if you've had to do this all day long, you need a stiff drink or two.
Just need a gallon of mead, please, at the end of the day, and a back massage.
Yeah.
With more than 50 coats of sugar required, the team will have to take shifts to make sure they have enough comfits for their banqueting table. As a bespoke wedding cake maker, Cynthia is used to creating beautiful, artistic pieces under pressure. She grew up in Nigeria and is completely self-taught.
Cake making's like my heart's in it. It's very much linked to my childhood and baking with my mom. Being thrown out of your comfort zone to get to experience life basically through the life of my counterparts, but hundreds of years ago. You just want to see how you stack up.
Confectioners in the 16th and 17th centuries often worked hand in hand with the lady of the house. For aristocratic women, sugar work, be it medicinal or decorative, was seen as an art along with music and embroidery. A perfect hostess's sugar banquet should not only delight the taste buds of her guests, but offer some unexpected bonuses. This is your next ingredient. Any idea what it is?
Ivy?
Holly?
It's a plant which is known today as oringo, and it was quite common in recipes and used for a very, very specific purpose. They were the Viagra of their day.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Do you know how much is there?
Well, Culpepper said of them that they breedeth the seed exceedingly, and also that they were very good for the spirit procreative. So that's not at all euphemistic.
Well, it's a far cry from my Catholic upbringing, but I am doing what... It depends on how you play it. I am doing what I can to foster marital relations. Andy's not taking this lightly at all. Andy's trying to get every last root from there.
Fortune on Wigan Market with these.
Sweets to boost libido might be new to Andy, but as a troubleshooter for the confectionery industry, there's not much he hasn't seen.
So work in confectionery, you've got to be fairly unflappable because the nature of the stuff, you know, you're working with materials that are at high temperatures, especially the sugar. If you start it flapping and it goes everywhere, you know, you're in trouble. So you've got to be quite cool, calm and collected. I love my job the most because of the pleasure it gives other people. When you give someone something that you yourself have made, to see the look on their face, oh, absolutely gorgeous.
To complement Andy's natural Viagra, Paul and Diana are getting on with a Tudor cure for gonorrhea. Candied roses. Edible flowers were a regular feature on 17th century tables.
This is lightly beaten egg white, which we're just brushing onto the petals, and then we'll dip it into fine sugar.
By the end of Queen Elizabeth's reign in 1603, better grades of white powdered sugar had started to become available to confectioners. England had become a major centre for refining sugar for the European market.
We used to crystallise rose petals at home. My grandma grew roses. This is the simplest thing. It's like one of those things you do as a child. That is a technique rather than a recipe. And you get something that, look, it's like fairyland rose. And I was a little bit of a fairyland kid. I loved anything fairy tale. Shake the excess sugar off. There we go. And we're going to pop it close to the oven. Crispens up the petals.
The roots are blanched.
Sadly, there's nothing magical about Cynthia and Andy's Oringo.
What do you think it tastes like?
It tastes like, I'll tell you in a second.
I mean, it's got a thick coat of sugar now on it.
Chop suey. Tastes like a root coated in sugar.
It does taste like a root coated in sugar, doesn't it?
You don't need to eat that if you're desperate for it
It's
to
definitely-
perform another purpose.
It's definitely medicinal.
Yes, not for
you wouldn't
pleasure.
need that
No,
for pleasure,
you
no.
wouldn't need that for pleasure, definitely not.
An aristocratic sugar banquet was all about showing off the elite's wealth and taste. So with 3 days left, the confectioners need to focus on some more spectacular dishes.
Right, ready for the next task?
We are.
Yes, we are. Marvellous. The late Tudor and early Stuart banqueting course was a thing of beauty. The next fundamental part of it is to make a thing called sugar plate. There is a recipe.
Great.
This one is from a book by a man called Thomas Dawson.
Yeah.
The main thing you'll need for it is this.
Oh, it's like a fingernail.
This has gone track. This has gone
Yeah,
track.
it's gone through.
Ah.
We actually use this at the moment. Like if you were making sugar flowers and stuff, the really fine ones, you'd use that. So we use that from powder.
Gum-traganet is a natural product. It's a resin. It's a sap that comes out of a plant. My hat off to whoever discovered that by adding something like this to icing sugar, you could make something that was utterly malleable and
Yeah.
utterly brilliant. The recipe calls for you to soak it in rose water, and it does need soaking overnight. So we do have some pre-soaked.
Wow.
You can smell it.
Oh,
Smells.
it smells. That's going
That's
to make
lovely.
It smells like a really nicotine.
Turkish delight. Turkish delight.
The crucial thing here is to know, I suspect, what you're making with your sugar plate. You are going to be moulding it,
Yep.
which is clearly the easy route. You are also, as Mr. Dawson says, going to be making plates, dishes, cups and such like things wherewith you may furnish a table.
How cool.
And for your centrepiece for your banquet, you are going to be constructing a small banqueting house made out of sugar plate, but this is going to be the start of something beautiful.
Okay.
I think it's going to be.
In the 17th century, sugar sculpting was all the rage. One royal banquet at Whitehall boasted a complete sugar army of horses and soldiers.
I did a bit more rose water just for wetness.
The recipe that Paul and Cynthia are using for sugar plate combines powdered sugar, egg white, lemon juice and the soaked gum trag to make a malleable dough that they can mould.
We've cut a rectangle
Yeah.
for our side of our house. So I want to get this done tonight, so I'm going quite fast. I'm a bit concerned. We've got 2 days for it to dry out brittle hard so we can stick it together. Let's cut our edges. So the atmosphere is cold. It could
Just take a bit longer to dry.
take a long time to dry, or it could stick. There we go. 2 more to go. 2 ends and 2 roof.
Yeah.
Banqueting houses were where a select few guests could withdraw after the main meal to enjoy the sugar course and other pleasures. They were intimate spaces tucked discreetly in gardens or hidden on rooftops. The English love of sugar was so great that more than 60 banqueting houses were built by the elite in this era.
How are you feeling about this?
I'm a bit nervous, because if you're thinking,
I am.
if you need a lot of them, you need to know it's going to work.
Yes.
Hit it hard. Is it coming out?
It is coming out, but the bits of it are sticking.
Oh, it's so delicate. Oh, it's just catching that little edge, isn't it? Oh, brilliant.
Right.
Okay. That is fun. I'm so pleased with that. Look at
I
that.
am actually quite pleased
You've
with
done a
that.
fantastic job with that.
Pleased with that.
So, how many do we
About
need?
About 200.
Right, let's get going. We've got a lot of work to do.
With even plates and bowls made of the sweet stuff, the Tudor aristocracy were England's first sugar addicts, with no idea of the damage it was wreaking. Jelena Betvalets is an expert in the study of skeletons and teeth at the Museum of London.
This is the store where we keep about 20,000 individuals that have been found from archaeological excavations within the London area.
How incredible. What I'm particularly interested in is their teeth.
Yes, we've got 2 individuals here,
Mhm.
which are really good contrasts. This man was excavated from a site at Spitalfields Market.
Mhm.
So this individual we know is from 1100 to 1200. But as you can see, the
immaculate.
teeth are phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yes.
You wouldn't even, I don't think, you'd be hard pushed to find teeth that good these days. And I find myself sort of licking my own silver crowns quite surreptitiously.
This male individual is from a later time period
Mm-hmm.
and dated to about 1595 to 1666, so several hundred years between them. But you can see that their teeth are in not such good condition at all as the medieval. So if we turn this over and show you, you can see inside better. You've got really nasty indications of decay, so really bad dental health.
Mm-hmm.
You can see here, yes, you've got the teeth that have then been lost earlier, which probably again was caused from decay.
Mm-hmm.
This molar here, you can see that really nasty hole.
Writing at the time, Shakespeare's plays were full of references to stinking breath, while European ambassadors reported that Queen Elizabeth I had lost so many teeth that nobody could understand her when she spoke. So can we tell from the state of his teeth how wealthy this individual might have been and if he would have had access to sugar?
Yes, and from the context that we have from the archaeology, indicating that they would have had the type of status that would have enabled them to have then access sugar.
Mhm.
People are eating it, and
Mhm.
we see that decline in people's dental health.
The English loved sugar so much that they packed fruit dishes with this as well. Marmalades and tarts were a staple of the sugar banquet. But some fruits are more familiar than others to our modern confectioners.
Oh my gosh,
Yes,
look at those.
Seen them before?
No.
No.
They are called medlars, or the open arse fruit.
Any arse in particular?
Dog's arses.
Oh, okay.
That's what the French call them, coup de chien. And they are kind of rotten. When you read the recipe that you're about to do, you'll see it calls for rotten medlars. The term we tend to use now is bletted. They've been picked from the tree and they've been left somewhere cold until they soften. So you can see they are very, very soft.
It's not the most attractive fruit you ever saw, is it?
Well, it isn't. But the first time I tasted one, I couldn't get over how exquisite it was.
It smells interesting.
Quite apple-y.
It smells the way it looks.
Have a taste.
Do you mind if I don't?
Nice. Like baked apple.
Once grown in orchards across England, medlars have been popular since medieval times. And Maddie is simmering them with sugar, cinnamon, ginger and egg yolks. And Cynthia has made pastry tart cases. But the temperature of the ancient oven will be very hard to judge, so she will be baking blind in every sense.
Never quite done anything like this before, so fingers crossed.
It'll be fine.
All of the confectioners are beginning to recognise the limitations of their primitive equipment.
It needs to boil a bit more, doesn't it?
I know, these cauldrons, they just...
Let's pop the lid back on.
By the time they come to the boil, they need more fuel.
Yes.
It must have been a real challenge.
So the whole thing is boiling hot, handles are hot, but we need more fire, we need a lot more heat to get it to boil. It is wobbly, the pot is wobbly, so you have to be very, very careful, otherwise there will be a bit of scalding going on. So we're having to be very, very careful not
to get a bit more and put it on the other side.
Not to shake it too much.
One out first. Oops.
This one would look up at. It's really bad. There's several layers of badness here. The ovens are quite tricky to control, so it's not cooked at a high enough temperature. I mean, it must have been a nightmare to work with. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. It's gone awfully wrong, really.
So you did it wrong?
That is one way to interpret it, I guess. If you work with any sort of event of which banqueting is certainly an event, you would have thought ahead, and there's always a plan B, isn't there?
Luckily, pastry cases often weren't eaten. They were just vessels for serving the fruit mixture. So Cynthia is improvising with the serving bowl.
Yeah, mine's disappeared.
Lock and load.
After a long day of struggling with primitive equipment, the confectioners are relaxing with yet another unfamiliar tool, engraved wafer irons. Wafers were a staple of the banqueting table and were often used as the base for other dishes or dipped in sugared wine.
Like the knife.
Paul's back at the balancing pan on the next comfit shift.
I've probably been doing these now over an hour, and there's still 50 more coats to put on here. 50 more. So it is quite tough, but it's incredibly satisfying. And the smell, it must have been the most exotic smell they had, to have toasted coriander seeds coated in sugar. And I've never had a toasted coriander seed covered in sugar, so I can't wait to see what they taste like. But another 50 coats to get a tiny little seed. So I've got a lot of work to do. A lot.